Lesson 9.6, solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. This is our second day of this topic, so if you missed the first day, you might want to go back and check that before we work on this one. All right, so all we're doing here is we're using our formula. We are plugging them in and finding our zeros, right? We're solving, we're finding our zeros. So let's go ahead and look at problem number 1. Let's see here. All right, we've got 2x squared plus x plus 7. Hopefully you know that we cannot have this equal to 7 right now. We need it equal to 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get rid of this 7. Right, we're going to subtract 7 from both sides of my equation. Cannot subtract it from either of these, so just kind of have to stick it on the end here. So what I have when I'm done is 2x squared plus x minus 7 is equal to 0. Right, we could not add this to either of the terms, so now it's just a separate third term. All right, now I'm ready to use my formula. So I kind of wanted to be able to see what this was in each of these problems, which is why I am copy and pasting this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Now you'll notice that I've color-coded this, right? This is my formula that we're learning, quadratic formula, and I've left some spaces in this next one. So if you guys want to take a second, pause the video and copy that down, it's probably a good idea. All right, here we go. We have in the first spot, in the pink spot, right, we have B. In this case, B, should we write it over here? A is 2, B is the number with x, so just 1, and C is negative 7. So B is 1. Then we have minus 4a, right? The yellow is a, so in this case that is 2 in both of those spots. And then finally the C value is negative 7. There we go. So to clean this up, I like to do it in 3 parts. First, we focus on this outside piece, and we're going to say x is equal to negative parentheses 1 parentheses. And now, hopefully you know kind of what's going on here. We're just changing the sign of what's in the parentheses, but if that makes you uncomfortable, you can type it in the calculator just like that. Okay, and you will get negative 1. All right, so we get negative 1 plus or minus the square root of some number, I'm going to come back to that, all over 2 times 2, which is just 4. Right? Just 4. Okay, so let's find out what number goes inside my square root. And what we do is we just type what's inside of our square root into our calculator. So take a quick look. I'm going to do it exactly as it looks. So I have parentheses 1 squared minus 4, and then my a value is 2, and my c value is negative 7. All right, there we go. So it looks like I've got the number 57 in here. Okay, so this answer is a little bit weird. It's the first time we've seen something that looks like this. And we kind of just need to evaluate here, can we simplify? And we make that decision looking at this square root of 57. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to write it off to the side. I'm going to look at 57, and I'm going to try and find factors that multiply to 57. All right, and I know that besides 1 and 57, the only other number combination is going to be 3 times 19. Now both of these numbers are prime, so I'm going to write no factor pairs, right? We didn't have like a 3 and a 3 or a 19 and 19. We just had 1 3 and 1 19. So no factor, or I should say no matching factors. That's probably a better way to say that. No matching factors, which means no simplifying. Okay, if we can't have matching factors, then we can't simplify. Simplify. Man, I'm having problems today. Okay, simplifying. All right, so what that means is I am finished. This is as good as it gets. If I cannot simplify, then I just stop. My answer is negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 57 over 4. Now, why? You might be wondering, why do we just not use our calculator? Well, I went ahead and I put this equation for number 1 in my y equals, right? I got it equal to 0, and I got 2x squared plus x minus 7. Look at my graph. Look at this 0 right here. Can't really tell what it is. This 0 right here, again, can't really tell what it is. If I try to use my second trace, right, if I try to use this option to find my 0, we learned this in a previous lesson. Let's see, I'm going to focus on this 0 over here. So right now, my little blinky guy is left of the 0. And now it needs to be right of the 0. Okay, then it says guess. So I'm going to get as close as I can, maybe right there. Okay, look at that, y'all. 1.6374586. This decimal cannot be written as a fraction. This is not a rational number. If you get a crazy decimal like this, you got to use the quadratic formula, right? Because this is not exact. So when you get these zeros where you can't figure out really what they are, that's when we got to use the quadratic formula, okay? If you did want to kind of check your answer, I mean, you could, but for right now, let's just focus on the formula. All right, let's look at problem 2. Before I start problem 2, let me warn you, in my opinion, this is probably the most difficult thing that they could throw at you, like for example, on a test. All right, this question right here is the same stuff we've been learning, but with a lot more steps. All right, so just keep that in mind as this problem seems really difficult. All right, we know that A is 1, B is -6, and C is 3. So we're going to go ahead and fill in our numbers here. We know that B goes in the front, so -6 and -6, and then A is 1 going here and here, and C is 3, which goes in that space right there. Okay, once we've got them filled in, we can go ahead and simplify, right? Clean it up. So I've got x squared equals -6. Be careful, a lot of kids forget that double negative right there for some reason, and if you don't know what to do with it, type it in your calculator. But basically it's saying the opposite of -6, which is just +6. So I've got 6 plus or minus the square root of something all over 2 times 1, which is 2. All right, so let's figure out what number actually goes in this space, right, in this square root here. I'm going to type in exactly what I see. No square root, though, just what's under the square root. And I've got -6 squared minus 4, parentheses, 1, and my last parentheses, my C value is 3. And I get 24. Okay, now as we did previously, let's try and simplify 24. In this case, I actually have quite a few factors I could use. How about 3 and 8, or 2 and 12, or 4 and 6? Any of those work. Pick whichever one you like. I'm going to do 4 and 6. And then keep going until you get prime numbers, right? Prime numbers are numbers where the only branches you could use are 1 in itself. Don't do that, all right? Just circle it, it's prime. We got 2 and 3. Okay, once you've gotten this far, what we're going to do is we're going to put a square root sign, and we're going to go 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. And to simplify square roots, remember we're looking for pairs of matching factors. In this one previously, we didn't have any matching factors, so we stopped. But here, I got a pair of 2's. What you do is take that number, write it on the outside, right? Because 2 times 2 is 4, and the square root of 4 is 2. So essentially, whatever you have a pair of, write that number outside once. So now I've got 2 square root of, and we put these back together, we multiply them back together, and we get 6. So 2 square root of 6. All right, so I'm going to kind of do a little thing here, and let's look at what happens now in our problem. I'm going to write x equals 6 plus or minus, and then I've got this thing right here, right? Instead of the square root of 24, I'm writing 2 square root of 6. So let's draw a little arrow. This became 2 square root of 6, and all of this is over 2. And now we ask ourselves, is there anything else I can do to simplify? And there is, because each of these has an even coefficient, so I can divide them both by 2. Let me kind of show you what I mean. I can split this up. I can say 6 divided by 2 plus or minus 2 square root of 6 divided by 2. And I do this because now I can get my answer, which is just 3 plus or minus. These 2 divided by 2 gives me a 1, which I can write if you want, or you don't have to write it, and get square root of 6. So these are my answers, right? If you wanted to write it separately like this, x equals 3 plus square root of 6, and x equals 3 minus the square root of 6, you could write it that way too, or you can just use a plus minus. That's your call. I think on our test it has this kind of notation with just a plus minus. All right, you guys, keep your formula handy. It's on your yellow formula card, and if you get a problem like this, just remember, simplify as much as you can until there's nothing else you can do to get your final answer. All right. Before I forget to tell you guys, remember the quadratic formula is the only method that works for every single quadratic.